Okay, so I'm going to preview both Acts 4 and Act 5 for you and give you a lowdown of what you should be looking for and kind of a brief summary. That way you get some context for what you're either watching, listening to, or reading for those two acts. First and foremost, Act 4, Scene 1 starts in a house in Rome, and in particular, Mark Antony, Octavius, and Lepidus um, are there. And Mark Antony is obviously he just gave the speech that caused Rome to go into utter chaos and burn all the houses of the conspirators and stuff like that. But the question is who are Octavius and Lepidus? Well, Octavius Caesar is the nephew of Julius Caesar, who actually, if you've read your world history textbook, Octavius Caesar is also known as Augustus Caesar, and he later is solely in charge of Rome, and Rome actually has 50 years of peace known as the Pax Romana, and he's famous. So eventually, you know that Octavius will eventually historically be in charge. But in either case, Antony and Octavius, and then a guy named Marcus Aemilius Lepidus, who is kind of the money man, the bank, the financial part of the triumvirate here. They're sitting down and they're making a list and they're checking it twice, and they're going to determine who they're going to kill. And that's because they've just seized power and they are now in charge of Rome, and they're what is known as the triumvirate. In other words, they're in charge of Rome and there's three leaders. It's actually the second triumvirate. The first triumvirate um, was with Julius Caesar, Crassus, and a guy named Pompey, and then a civil war broke out. Eventually, Julius Caesar won. But in either case, in this scene, you get an opportunity to see that Mark Antony, the one who was so much like emotionally distraught, etc., about his good friend Julius Caesar, you actually see him turn like into a cold-blooded killer here with coming up with the things that he's saying and doing, and how he even talks trash about other people in this. So you should pay attention because it's a good example of how power corrupts and absolute power corrupts absolutely. We also learn at the end of this scene that Cassius and Brutus have their own forces that they're gathering, and they're going to be having a battle pretty soon with Antony, Octavius, and Lepidus eventually. So going back to the main page then here, when you get to Act 4, Scenes 2 and Scenes 3, this is where you get a chance to see what Brutus and Cassius are up to. And in fact, their forces have met on the field of Sardis, and they're in front of Brutus's tent for these scenes. And well, the second scene they go into Brutus's tent. But basically, you realize that Cassius and Brutus have had their own problems with each other, and so pay attention to that dialogue because you get an idea of what kind of a person Brutus is, and you get what kind of a like choleric and emotional person that Cassius is. Because Brutus stays calm throughout the whole argument. They even have an argument in Act 4, Scene 3. That said, in that scene, they resolve their differences, and then Brutus ends up seeing the ghost of Caesar, and the ghost says, "I shall see thee at Philippi," which is the famous scene of the last battle between the forces of Brutus and Cassius versus the forces of Octavius Caesar, Mark Antony. Ironically, you won't see Marcus Aemilius Lepidus in the scene. In Roman history, they get rid of him first. So that brings us to Act 5. Act 5 is it's fast and furious, it's quick, it's the battle. And then Act 5, Scene 1, it basically is Octavius and Antony meeting up against Cassius and Brutus, and they have a little verbal joust before the battle actually begins. And then basically Act 5, Scene 2, 3, 4, and 5 is all just battle scenes in which, eventually first person that dies is Cassius. And the way that he dies, well, you should check it out because it's appropriate for the type of person that he was. And then by the end of the play, obviously, Marcus Brutus, our tragic hero, also has to die. That's why it's a tragedy. And by the end of the play, you'll see who's really in charge. In fact, if you read the last scene, you'll see whoever gets the last line of a Shakespearean play is the one who's in charge. So that's the preview of Acts 4 and Act 5. It's all about unraveling what happened in Acts 1, 2, and 3. Act 1, Caesar is really powerful. Cassius is trying to get Brutus to join the conspiracy. Act 2, Brutus joins the conspiracy because he's the tragic hero of the play. He's the guy that is the good guy gone wrong, so to speak. And then Act Three, they assassinate Julius Caesar, and all chaos breaks loose because of Mark Antony's speech and all that. And now we're at the point where like we need to have an end to how Brutus comes to an end. How does Cassius meet his fate? Who ends up in charge of Rome by the end of it? And that's what Act Four and Act Five are truly about.